Hello and welcome to Real Life Faith. My name is Chris, and I'm one of the pastors here at Fairview Church in Englewood, Ohio. And this is episode 23 of Real Life Faith, believe it or not, and it is getting to you a little bit late, and I want to apologize for that. My schedule just got away from me over the past week and a half or so, and it's just one of those seasons, one of those times. So if you don't know about Fairview Church, it's in Englewood, Ohio on Union Boulevard. If you're local and you know the Englewood area, if you know where Kroger is, we're just up the street from Kroger on the other side next to the apartments. And so that's where we are. You can hit subscribe or follow. What is it? It's follow on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. And, you can track along and be with us at 10:45 on Sunday mornings. And what Real Life Faith is an exercise in how kind of figuring out how does the Bible help us deal with like real struggles and real growth and transform that into real discipleship in our own lives. And one of the little subtitles to Real Life Faith is practicing the way of Jesus in everyday. Faith was meant to shape your whole life. And that's what we hope to do. That's why we're going through this book. It's called Banding Together. And if you would like a copy of this, we can send that to you. You can either text the number that's on your screen right now or send an email address to that email address that's on your screen, and we can send you one of those. And this thing is great because it's your own little journal. And I won't go in. You can go back to episode 1 if you want to learn more about how this all works, but there's different steps, and this book is really designed to be used in a situation where you're in a either one-on-one or small group scenario, but we've decided to take that and bring that to Facebook and YouTube and do this in video form. And so there's if you would like to create a group of your own to do this with in real life, we can send you some of these books if you'd like to do that. So we're just going to kind of get into what real life faith looks like. We have this agenda, and the reason I call this real life faith is sometimes we relegate our faith life to like just being in church on Sunday mornings, or just maybe doing certain things that we say, well, that is what faith does. And it's so much bigger than that. The gospel is so much bigger than just attending church service. It's much larger. And that's what we're trying to work through in all of our lives. And so these questions are designed to take a look at or send me an email or post it in the comments down below in this video. And I know not everybody wants to have their thoughts out there on the internet for everybody to see. That's why you have those other options of either sending a text message or sending an email. And if you didn't hear God speak to you this week, I would invite you to think about, did God speak to me or did I not hear? Was I not listening? Was I not putting myself in a space to listen? And the last question there is, did you have any questions from your reading and we'll get to what that was this week. And it's all prescribed by month and day in the book. And so if you see, like this week, this is what we're going to be going over, that's all from this book and the dates. And so day 7 should have been the day I did this podcast this past Monday, but unfortunately, like I said, things got a little behind. But here are some additional questions as far as accountability. going into this, and this is just to give us time to think about these things, and I'm going to just go through these really quickly, but if you would like to pause after every one of these questions, please feel free to do so. Please feel free to give yourself time to spend coming up with an answer to these questions. So here's the first one. How is it with your soul? And what are you celebrating? And you can see biblical references off to the side of there. If you want to even pause long enough to go read those, because they are valuable. I won't go into that all because I do try to keep each one of these podcasts relatively compressed. But if you would like to pause between each one of these questions and go and look at that, feel free. You just need to confess. And actually, in our reading this week, we're going to get into some of the mechanism of what we do that, like how we confess that sin if we've sinned against somebody. Have you been angry, fearful, or anxious, and why? And I will say yes, I have had a little bit of anxious stuff going on this week with my schedule, and so I will confess that. And it's okay. We're going to be transparent in all of this and say it's okay to admit to these things. We have emotions that are fair, and we are given them for a reason, and that gives us time to look at why are we anxious? Why am I fearful? Why am I angry? Do you need to reconcile with anyone? Is there anyone that you've just had those situations where things have fallen apart that you just need that reconciliation with them? And how well are you loving those whom God has placed in your life? Episode. That means not just family members or friends, but anybody who comes in there. So again, here is what we're going over this week, and towards the end of this podcast, I will have what will be on episode 24. This is episode 23, and I will have that here in a little while as gained from the book that we're going through. And if you want to do a screenshot of that, if you don't have one of those books, I'll give you the opportunity to do that towards the end of this podcast. So we're going to get right into it, but I'm going to pray for us first. Lord, we just ask that you open our hearts to your word. Help us to receive it, and help us to know how it works in our lives. Lord, help us to move beyond this, and help us to live out the real life faith that you've called us to. And we just ask that you would remove the obstacles, remove our excuses, remove anything that is hindering us from growing closer to you. And we ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. So let's get into our reading. Day 1 was Numbers 5 through 6, or 5 and 6, I guess you could say. And the verse I picked out was Numbers 5, 6, and 7. It was a couple verses, and it says, when a man or a woman wrongs another in any way, and so is unfaithful to the Lord, that person is guilty and must confess the sin they have committed. So confession and making things right is what this is about. And real faith isn't just acknowledging that we've sinned against God. Sometimes it means taking responsibility and making things right with the people we've hurt. And that's just what I drew from this passage. That's the wonderful thing about this book, is there's no real right answer. In Numbers 5, that was what popped out to me. You may read through Numbers 5 and see something totally different that you've put in your journal. And if you have something completely different than what I did, it's not a wrong thing. I would like to hear what you read in Numbers 5 that you drew out differently from what I did. So that just that goes for the rest of this podcast. Anytime you see what I have focused on, don't let that be the right answer. Just know that you have something that might be good in there that you need to share with others watching this video. And so you can either put it in the comments or you can email it to me and I can post it anonymously like, hey, this is what somebody else drew from this. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this. Also in day 1, number 6, and numbers 6, 24, and 26 was what stuck out to me. It said, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. And if you've been in church a long time, you might have heard a song that uses these exact words. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Living under God's blessing means God's desire isn't simply to give Israel things. His desire is to have his people experience his presence, grace, protection, and peace. And what does it mean for you to live each day knowing that God's face is turned towards you, that he is in your favor and rooting you on? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But moving on to day 2, this is number 7 and numbers 8. And number 7, verse 9 was what popped out to me. And it says, but to the Kohathites he gave none, because they were to carry on their shoulders the holy things for which they were responsible. Now here's an important thing to remember. Everyone has a responsibility. The tribes brought offerings, and the Levites had different assignments. Not everybody's job was the same, but everybody had a role. Now, this is a great connection to the church. We don't all have to serve in the same way, but we all have a part to play. And if you are a part of a church, you're not part of Fairview, and you haven't found your place there, be looking for that. And if you're a part of the Fairview Church, be looking for your place there. Be looking for what it is that you can do in the way you can serve in your congregation. There's something of enormous value when we all find those places. Day 2 was also Numbers 8 and Numbers 8:18. It says, and I have taken the Levites in place of every firstborn son in Israel. So the Levites, they were set apart for God's purposes. The Levites belong to God for a particular purpose. As followers of Christ, we also are called to recognize that our lives aren't ultimately our own. God has purposes for each one of us. And I'm telling you, if you haven't found that purpose, talk to a pastor. If you're part of the Fairview Church, come talk to Pastor Spencer or Pastor Kara, Pastor Gary, or me, one of us 4, and we will have an idea of where that place is. And if you are part of a church that's not Fairview, I would talk to somebody. If you find yourself attending, and I'm not saying this in a mean way, but if you find yourself attending on Sunday mornings, look for that extra space. Look for that other place where you can serve. Now, I know there are seasons in life where sometimes we just need to sit and be in God's presence on Sunday morning, and we just don't have the emotional bandwidth to apply ourselves in another way. But I would challenge you to think about and to pray about, if your Sunday morning is just attending a church service and that is the extent of your faith experience, I would encourage you to find that next space. And it may be hard. It may have been a long time since you've done that, and maybe you got hurt in a church and you just don't want to do that again. I get that, but I would challenge you to think about finding that place, because God has a purpose for every one of us. I mean, I'm one of those people that I believe firmly that God has a place for every one of us in His church. And I know in recent years, a lot of people, through deconstruction and through just reevaluating, I know that can be a challenge in a lot of ways. And if you need somebody to pray with you on that, man, hit me up. I'll be there for you. So moving on to day 3, Numbers 9 and 10. At the Lord's command, this is Numbers 9:23. At the Lord's command, they encamped, and at the Lord's command, they set out. this has everything to do with following God's timing. Israel didn't simply decide when to stay and when to go. They watched for God's direction. Sometimes faith means moving, and sometimes it means staying put. Can we trust God when his timing doesn't match ours? That's a tough question. There are going to be times where you feel like moving, and God is like, hey, I want you to stay. And you can have times that you want to stay, and God's like, hey, I want you to move. There's something in there that prayer is the important key that opens that up and helps us to understand that better. In Numbers 10, this is on day 3 again, Numbers 10:35. Whenever the ark set out, Moses said, "Rise up, Lord, may your enemies be scattered. May your foes flee before you." God goes with us. Israel's confidence wasn't supposed to come from its numbers or military strength. The presence of God went before them. That difference is everything. And what difference does it make when we believe we're not walking through life's wilderness alone? And do you believe you're not walking through life's wilderness alone? If you don't believe that, if you feel like you are facing life's wilderness alone, I want you to pray about that. And I want you to open your heart to the idea that God is going before you, just like he went before Israel. Also on day 4, Numbers 11. Oh, wait a minute. What was yesterday? That was day 3. This is day 4. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Numbers 11:23. The Lord answered Moses, "Is the Lord's arm too short? Now you will see whether or not what I say will come true for you." When our faith gets smaller than our problems, that's an issue. Israel complained about what they didn't have, and even Moses became overwhelmed at times. I mean, he's one of the heroes of our faith, but that you can find right there in Numbers where he got frustrated. And God reminds Moses that his power isn't limited by circumstances. What problems are we treating as though it's too big for God? Do you have any of those? Let's just be honest. You can say yes. I will say yes to that. I do that from time to time. I grab onto those things as if they're mine to carry. And it's okay to say, you know what? I think this is a bit much. Was that day 4? I did not do Numbers 12, and I do apologize for that. But we're going to skip on to day 5, Numbers 13:30. And it says, Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." And if you haven't read this, I would invite you to read through Numbers 13. Faith sees bigger. It sees God as bigger than the obstacles. And the spies saw the same land, the same giants, and the same fortified cities. 10 saw impossibility, and Caleb saw God's promise. What determines whether we see giants or God? And I think that is such a great question. How do we interpret those things around us? I think today we have a lot of Christian people living in fear, and you can see it in our actions. You can see it in the things we turn to try to kind of level up our faith. You can see it in social media. And I won't point out the hows and whys of that, but you can see it in people that we sometimes are allowing our fear to be bigger than God. And as we will see in this next reading, fear can actually become rebellion. So this is in Numbers 14:9, and it says, "Only do not rebel against God, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." Israel's problem wasn't that they were afraid. Their fear caused them to lose trust in God and reject his promise. Faith doesn't mean that there are no giants, that there aren't things that are going to come against us. It means we don't allow those giants to become bigger than God. That's a challenge, and let's be honest about that. We'll move on to day 6, Numbers 15 and 16. And this is from Numbers 15:39. "Then you will remember all the commands of the Lord, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourselves by chasing after the lusts of your own hearts and eyes. Remembering God at all times and in all ways and in all places keeps us faithful. God gives Israel a tangible reminder to help them remember his commands. We are forgetful people. Let's just be honest. We can lose our commitment to seeing things in God's way and allow ourselves, for any number of reasons, to see things the way we want to see them. What practices help us remember who God is and how he has called us to live? I think there are all sorts of practices. Worship is one. Prayer is another. Doing things like discipleship and videos like this and staying in that space at all the times. You know, Paul says to pray without ceasing. What does that look like, to pray without ceasing? What does that look like? I mean, you can't just like sit and pray all the time, and that's not the expectation. But what does it mean to be in a state of exchange with God and listening to God at all times and all things? There's something to that. But that's how he has called us to live. Also on day number 6 was number 16 and verse 11 that kind of popped out to me. It is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Now, when criticism, this is one of those times when criticism becomes rebellion. The issue wasn't simply disagreement with Moses and Aaron. Ultimately, they were rebelling against God's established order. A good question for us is, when does legitimate disagreement cross the line into a heart of rebellion? That's a tough question. That's something that you could really spend a lot of time on. We won't in here, but there are those times where you can be in a disagreement with somebody, but still be together in spirit. And then there's a time you can be in disagreement and cause division. And we know the difference. We know what results when that difference is there, and we divide rather than unite. And so that's just a good question to think about. Like, when are those times that my disagreement crosses a line there? And so moving on to day 7, this is Numbers 17 and 18 on day 7. And Numbers 17:8 says, the next day Moses entered the land and saw that Aaron's staff had not only sprouted, but had budded blossoms and produced almonds. Now, if you haven't read this makes no sense. You got to read this entire thing in context. But this is a confirmation of God's calling. God causes Aaron's dead staff to produce life as a visible confirmation of his choice. We don't need to constantly manufacture evidence that God has called us. We can trust him to establish what he wants to establish. That's tough. Sometimes it's not what we want, it's what he wants. And also on day 7 was Numbers 18. And Numbers 18:20 was what stuck out to me. I am your share and your inheritance among the Israelites. This is God himself saying that he is our inheritance. The priests and the Levites didn't receive an ordinary tribal inheritance like the other Israelites. God says, in effect, I am your portion. And that's a powerful question for modern believers. Is God himself enough for us? Or do we primarily want what God can give us? That's tough. And that gets back into what I said at the beginning of this podcast, that the gospel is so much more than what we get from God. It's so much bigger than that. It's not a one-time thing where we just get this gift of salvation and we're good. What some people used to say, saved and satisfied. It's us moving into that place where we are working together for the kingdom work with God, and not just accepting a one-time gift, but realizing that what we need to do is give ourselves to God, and then he becomes our inheritance. So towards the end of every podcast, I like to go through this agenda, and this is just questions. You don't have to answer these. You don't have to feel bad for not having an answer, but the first question is, who are you praying for this week and why? And that question infers that there's somebody in your life that you're praying for. So if there's a name that just pops into your head when I ask that question, I want you to cling to that, and I want you to write that person's name down and be praying for them. And who are you praying would surrender their life to Jesus? Again, if there's a name that pops into your head, like I just had one pop into my head, then I'm gonna write their name down, or I'm gonna spend time praying for that person. And who is someone you could start a discipleship group? If you wanted to use the Banding Together book, who is someone you could start a discipleship group with in the future? And if there are names that pop into your head, I want you to write those names down. I want you to pray about it and send us a message. If you would like one of these books to do that, you can send us a text message and we can get you some of those books. And so for next week, that'll be episode 24. And that's coming up this Monday. Will be our reading plan. If you want to do the screenshot of that, you can do that, or I will try my best to remember to get that information down in the comments section or down in the information on this video. So thank you for being a part of Real Life Faith. Thank you for being a part of episode 23. If you've never visited the Fairview Church website, I'll put a link somewhere that you could go visit our website. And if you just feel led to give, if there's, I'm not one to ask for money. That's just, I hate doing that. But if you feel led to give to the ministry of Fairview, I would encourage you to go to the give section on our website, and you can find a few different drop-down menus. And if you would like to give a gift to this church, that would be enormously appreciated. And I just want to thank you for being a part of Real Life Faith, episode 23. Thanks for watching. Take care.